"I'm your wife, can I suck it?" The shy rancher trembled, but when the bride did, he forgot every. His days began long before the sun rose, with the soft rustle of hay and the low, comforting calls of his cattle. The wide-open field, stretching as far as the eye could see, had been his playground, his home, and his sanctuary. Most people in town called him shy, even reserved. He didn't speak much when he didn't have to, but those who knew him well understood that behind his quiet eyes was a man full of thought, care, and unexpected warmth. Life on the ranch was simple but demanding. Jake spent hours each day feeding the animals, repairing fences, and tending to the land. There was a rhythm to it, a gentle routine that brought him peace. He loved the smell of fresh hay in the morning, the soft crunch of soil under his boots, and the golden sunlight spilling over the fields. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest, and Jake had learned to find joy in the little things. The way the wind moved through the grass, the way a newborn calf struggled to stand on wobbly legs, and the quiet satisfaction of a day's work completed. Despite this contentment, Jake had always felt a quiet longing, not for adventure or fame, but for connection. He had grown up on this ranch, mostly alone, learning responsibility early but missing the close companionship that others seemed to find so easily. His parents had passed when he was young, leaving him with the ranch and the memories of a childhood that had been both beautiful and lonely. He had friends in town, sure, but they could never fully understand the life he lived, the way he felt most alive when surrounded by the land he loved. Then came Emily. She was unlike anyone Jake had ever met. Bright, lively, and full of laughter, she seemed to light up every room she entered. She wasn't from around there. She had grown up in the city, where life was fast, noisy, and full of surprises. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity, and she had a way of asking questions that made people open up, even those who were naturally reserved. When she first arrived at the town's annual fair, Jake had watched from a distance, fascinated by her energy. She moved with confidence and grace, speaking to strangers with ease, yet there was a warmth to her that felt genuine, not performative. Their first conversation was brief, almost accidental. Emily had asked for directions to the nearest farm supply store, and Jake had pointed her down the dusty road without saying much more. But she had smiled at him in a way that made his chest tighten, and he found himself lingering, hoping to catch another glimpse of her. Over the next few weeks she returned to the fair, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends, and each time she found ways to strike up small conversations with him. At first, Jake was awkward, unsure what to say, but her friendly persistence slowly drew him out of his shell. They began to meet more intentionally. Emily found reasons to visit the ranch, wanting to see the animals, help with small chores, or simply enjoy the peace of the countryside. Jake, who had been so used to solitude, discovered that he looked forward to her visits more than he expected. She asked questions about his life, about the ranch, about his dreams. And though he spoke sparingly at first, he began to share more, opening up about his childhood, his routines, and the pride he felt in the work he did. She listened with genuine interest, never judging, always encouraging. As the weeks turned into months, their connection deepened. Emily's city ways mixed with Jake's country life in a way that was both challenging and exciting. She introduced him to things he had never tried, like trying new foods, attending town events, or reading books about far-off places. In return, Jake showed her the quiet beauty of his world, the sunsets over the fields, the gentle rhythm of the animals, and the satisfying simplicity of life on the ranch. They laughed together, shared stories, and slowly began to trust each other. Jake had never been a man of grand gestures, but he found himself thinking about Emily constantly. The thought of her smile, the sound of her laugh, the way her eyes lit up when she was excited, all of it lingered in his mind long after she left. He had always been shy, but with Emily, he discovered a courage he didn't know he possessed. He wanted to be worthy of her, to make her happy, to protect the joy she brought into his life. Emily, on her part, was equally captivated. She admired his dedication, his quiet strength, and the way he treated everyone with respect, even when he barely spoke. There was a depth to him that she had never encountered before, a reliability and honesty that drew her in. She loved the way he cared for his animals, the way he moved with ease across the fields, and the subtle ways he showed he was thinking of her, even in small gestures like remembering her favorite snack or leaving a hand-carved wooden token by her door. Before long, it became clear to both of them that what they felt was more than friendship. It was a slow, gentle love that grew from shared moments and understanding, a love that didn't need to be loud or dramatic to be real. They spent evenings sitting on the porch, watching the sky change color, talking about dreams, fears, and hopes. They shared quiet meals, walked through the fields, and found comfort in simply being near each other. When Jake finally asked Emily to stay at the ranch for good, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. They planned a small, intimate wedding, inviting only close friends and family. It was a simple ceremony, held under the wide-open sky, surrounded by the land that had shaped Jake's life. Emily wore a modest dress, her hair softly curled, and Jake, in his best suit, couldn't stop staring at her. He felt a mix of nervousness and excitement, a shyness that never truly left him, now colored by the love he felt for her. That day, as they exchanged vows, Jake realized that his life was changing in ways he had never imagined. For the first time, he felt seen completely, not just for his work or his quiet nature, but for who he was inside. Emily had brought light into the quiet corners of his life, and in turn, he had shown her a world she had never known but had come to love. It was a beginning, not just of marriage, but of a life shared, full of challenges, joys, and growth. Even after the wedding, Jake's shyness didn't disappear, but it no longer held him back. He had found someone who understood him, who encouraged him, and who made him feel strong in his vulnerability. And in that understanding, he discovered a new courage, a courage that would carry him through the seasons ahead, through long days on the ranch, and through every challenge life would bring. Life on the ranch continued as it always had, but now it was richer. Every sunrise, every animal, every small chore carried with it a shared meaning. Jake and Emily moved forward together, building not just a home, but a life that honored both their strengths and their differences. And in the quiet moments when the world seemed still and the fields stretched endlessly around them, Jake felt a deep sense of gratitude for the land he loved, for the life he had built, and for the woman who had shown him the courage to open his heart. After the wedding, life on. The ranch seemed perfect at first glance. The sun still rose over the wide fields. The cattle still moved lazily across the pastures, and Jake continued with his daily routines. But beneath the surface, small tensions began to appear, nothing dramatic, nothing shocking, just the quiet friction of two very different people learning to live together in the same space. Jake had always been shy, reserved, and deeply private. He was used to a life of solitude, where his thoughts, worries, and fears were his alone to manage. Emily, on the other hand, was expressive, open, and often eager to share feelings, plans, and dreams. At first, Jake thought he could handle it, but he soon realized that the ease with which Emily spoke about everything, from her day in town to her childhood memories, made him painfully aware of how much he kept inside. Small misunderstandings began to crop up. Emily might suggest trying a new recipe for dinner, or ask Jake to attend a town event with her, and he would hesitate or decline. She didn't push aggressively, but the hesitation was enough to make her wonder if he cared about the shared life they were building. Meanwhile, Jake often felt overwhelmed by the constant flow of words, questions, and expectations. He wanted to be with her, loved her deeply, but sometimes he felt like he couldn't measure up. One chilly autumn evening, Emily suggested they go for a walk along the edge of the ranch. The wind rustled through the dry grass, and the sky was streaked with soft oranges and purples as the sun set. Jake followed, trying to shake off the nervousness that had settled into his chest. He wanted to enjoy this moment, but his mind kept circling back to all the ways he feared he was failing Emily, not opening up, not being social enough, not doing enough to show his love. "You've been quiet today," Emily said gently, noticing his distant gaze. "Are you thinking about something?" Jake hesitated. It was hard to put his thoughts into words. I don't know, just stuff." Emily stopped walking and turned to face him. Her eyes were kind but curious. "Jake, I love you. You don't have to have all the answers, but I want you to share what's on your mind. I want us to really talk." Jake swallowed hard. His throat felt tight. He had spent so long keeping his feelings to himself that speaking them now seemed impossible. "I'm just not good at this," he admitted finally. "At talking, I mean, at saying what I feel. I don't want to hurt you, but sometimes it's easier to just stay quiet." Emily reached out, placing her hand lightly on his arm. "You won't hurt me by being honest. I want to understand you, Jake. We're a team. You don't have to carry everything alone anymore." Her words were comforting, but Jake felt exposed. Vulnerability had always been hard for him, and the idea of laying bare all the insecurities he had carried for years was terrifying. Yet in that moment, he also felt a small flicker of hope, a chance to bridge the gap between his quiet world and Emily's open one. Despite this attempt at connection, challenges persisted. Jake's shyness sometimes caused him to retreat at moments when Emily wanted to engage. She might share an exciting idea, only for him to respond with silence or a short, hesitant reply. In turn, Emily began to feel frustration mixed with concern. She knew he loved her, she could see it in his actions, but she also wanted to feel closer to him, to share more of her life and hear about his inner world. One weekend, the tension became more noticeable. Emily invited some neighbors over for a casual barbecue, a simple gathering with laughter, stories, and shared food. Jake agreed to host, but as soon as the first guests arrived, he felt the familiar tightness in his chest. He moved through the crowd with polite smiles, nods, and brief small talk, but Emily noticed the way he avoided extended conversation. After a while, she pulled him aside quietly. "Jake, are you okay?" she asked softly. "You're barely saying anything to anyone. I know social situations are hard for you, but you can relax. You're with friends, people who care about you." Jake sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know, it's just, I don't know what to say. I don't want to mess up or say something wrong." Emily gave him a reassuring smile. "You won't. Just be yourself. That's who we all want to be around you, not someone pretending to be more outgoing." Her encouragement helped, but it didn't erase the anxiety that lingered in Jake's mind. Social gatherings, small talk, and even sharing daily thoughts with Emily were challenges he wasn't used to. And while he loved her dearly, the new layers of expectations in their relationship sometimes left him feeling inadequate and frustrated with himself. Meanwhile, Emily had her own struggles. She loved Jake's quiet strength, but she also wanted more interaction, more shared experiences. She began to notice patterns in his behavior, avoiding eye contact when uncomfortable, leaving rooms when conversations turned too personal, hesitating to express opinions or desires. It wasn't that Jake didn't care, he cared deeply, but his shyness was beginning to feel like a barrier, one that Emily wasn't sure how to overcome. The turning point came one evening during dinner. They had cooked together, a rare moment of shared domesticity that usually brought them laughter. But that night, a small disagreement over the seasoning in the food escalated. Emily teased Jake lightly, trying to inject humor into the situation, but he misinterpreted it as criticism. "I'm just trying to help," Emily said, noticing his silence and the tension in his shoulders. "I know," Jake replied quietly, avoiding her gaze. "It's just I don't know if I can do anything right." Emily's smile faded. She reached across the table, taking his hand. "Jake, that's not true. You do so much right. But I need you to trust me. Trust that I'm not here to judge you or find fault. I'm here to love you exactly as you are." Jake looked down at their joined hands, feeling a mix of relief and shame. He wanted to believe her, wanted to open up, but the habit of keeping things inside was strong. He realized that if he didn't try, if he didn't confront these fears, the quiet distance between them could grow. And he couldn't let that happen, not with Emily, not after everything they had built together. Over the following days, Jake began making small changes. He started leaving brief notes for Emily, small messages of affection, appreciation, and reassurance. He began to share little details about his day, things he never thought to voice before. The way a calf struggled to stand, a funny encounter with a neighbor, a thought he had while fixing a fence. These small gestures didn't erase all tension, but they marked the beginning of a new phase in their relationship. A phase where communication, though awkward and sometimes slow, started to bridge the gap between their worlds. Emily noticed the effort and responded with patience and encouragement. She began asking more open-ended questions, giving Jake space to answer without pressure, and celebrating the small moments of honesty. They had late-night conversations on the porch, talking about fears, dreams, and their shared future. Each time Jake opened a little more, he felt both exposed and liberated, discovering the joy of being truly known and accepted. By the end of the season, the couple had learned an important lesson. Love was not just about grand gestures or constant excitement. It was about patience, understanding, and the willingness to grow together, even when it was uncomfortable. The ranch, once a place of solitude for Jake, had become a home filled with laughter, conversation, and quiet connection. And while challenges remained, both Jake and Emily understood that their love was strong enough to weather them, as long as they were willing to face their fears together. Autumn had deepened, painting the fields in shades of gold, red, and brown. The crisp air carried the smell of fallen leaves and wood smoke from the small fireplace in their home. Jake and Emily had grown closer over the past months, but the quiet tensions of their differences still lingered, like shadows in the corners of their lives. Jake had been trying, he really had, but old habits die hard. Sometimes he found himself retreating into silence when Emily's words overwhelmed him, leaving him frustrated with himself and worried that he might push her away without meaning to. One afternoon, Emily suggested they work together to clean out the old barn. It was a large, dusty space, full of old tools, cobwebs, and memories of Jake's childhood. Emily loved helping with the chores when she could, and Jake appreciated her willingness to step into his world. He had invited her along not only to share the work but also to create moments of connection, hoping that the physical activity might make conversation easier than sitting face to face. They started together, lifting old hay bales, brushing away dust, and organizing tools. At first, the atmosphere was light and easy. Emily laughed when a stray chicken wandered into the barn, and Jake smiled quietly, enjoying her amusement. But as they worked, the topic of conversation slowly shifted toward more personal matters. Emily, noticing Jake's habitual hesitation, decided to take a gentle approach. "Jake," she said, pausing to wipe her hands on her apron, "do you ever feel like, I don't really understand you sometimes?" Jake froze. He had been expecting small talk, not this direct question. For a moment he didn't know what to say. His heart raced. He wanted to reassure her, to make her feel safe, but the words seemed lodged in his throat. Finally, he exhaled slowly and nodded. I think about that a lot," he admitted. "I want you to understand me, but it's hard for me to put things into words. I'm used to keeping my thoughts to myself. It's not because I don't want you to know me, I just don't know how sometimes." Emily took a step closer. "I know, Jake. And I've noticed how much effort you're making. I see it. But I also want you to know that it's okay to be vulnerable with me. I'm not here to judge. I'm here to listen, even when it's hard." Hearing her words, Jake felt something shift inside him. He had spent his life building walls around his heart, walls made of habit, shyness, and fear of rejection. But here was Emily, gently asking him to tear them down, not with force but with patience and love. For the first time in years, he felt the courage to speak without holding back. He stepped closer and sat down on an old wooden crate, motioning for Emily to sit beside him. The dust in the barn seemed to settle, and the sounds of the animals outside faded as if the world had narrowed to just the two of them. "Emily," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "there are things I've never told anyone. Even when I was growing up here, I always felt like I had to be strong, to handle everything on my own. I didn't want to burden anyone, and I think I've carried that into our life together. I don't always know how to share what I feel, and sometimes I get scared that I'll mess things up with you." Emily listened, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "Jake, thank you for telling me. I know it isn't easy for you. And I want you to know, you haven't messed anything up. Being honest about your fears is the bravest thing you can do." Jake swallowed hard, his throat tight. He had expected relief from speaking, but he hadn't anticipated the wave of emotion that followed. Tears pricked at his eyes, not out of sadness, but from the sudden release of years of pent-up worry and self-doubt. Emily reached out and held his hand firmly, her own eyes soft and understanding. "I'm here," she said simply. "Always. You don't have to carry everything alone anymore. I want us to share the burdens, the fears, and the joys together." In that moment, something inside Jake shifted. The weight of his fears seemed lighter. He realized that vulnerability didn't make him weak, it made him human. And in sharing his thoughts with Emily, he discovered a deeper intimacy than he had ever imagined possible. Over the next few weeks, Jake began to experiment with this newfound courage. He started small, telling Emily about things that had made him happy during the day, expressing opinions he had previously kept to himself, and even joking in ways that made her laugh. Each time he opened a little more, he felt a growing sense of pride and relief. And Emily, seeing his effort, responded with warmth and encouragement, making it clear that she valued every small step he took. One evening, they sat together by the fireplace, drinking hot cocoa and listening to the wind outside. Emily looked at him with a thoughtful expression. "Jake, can I ask you something?" "Of course," he replied. "Do you ever feel afraid that being honest with me might change how I see you?" Jake paused. He had feared that moment many times, worried that revealing his inner struggles might make him seem less strong or capable. But now, with Emily's patient gaze and gentle tone, he felt ready to answer honestly. "Yes," he admitted quietly. "I'm afraid sometimes. But I'm also learning that fear doesn't have to control me, and I trust you more than I've ever trusted anyone." Emily smiled and squeezed his hand. "That's all I need to hear. I don't expect perfection, Jake. I just want honesty, effort, and love. And I have all of that from you." Their conversation that night became a turning point in their relationship. It wasn't a magical solution to every challenge they faced, but it marked the moment when Jake began to truly confront his fears and embrace emotional intimacy. He realized that his shyness didn't have to define him, that he could grow and change without losing himself. In the following months, Jake and Emily continued to strengthen their bond. They faced small disagreements, like differences in daily routines or communication styles, but these were now met with discussion rather than withdrawal. Jake learned to pause and express his thoughts, while Emily learned to give him space when needed. Together, they discovered that love was not about perfect harmony, but about the effort to understand and support one another. One crisp morning, as the first frost of winter touched the fields, Emily surprised Jake with a small gesture. She had arranged a corner of the barn with a few chairs, a small table, and a lantern, creating a cozy space for them to share stories and memories. Jake was touched by the thoughtfulness. "You always find ways to make life special," he said softly, his voice filled with gratitude. Emily laughed, a gentle sound that seemed to warm the chilly air. "I just want us to have moments where we can connect, really connect. Life is short, Jake. We shouldn't let fear or hesitation get in the way." Jake nodded, realizing how much he had grown. The shy, reserved man who had once avoided conversation now felt a spark of confidence he had never known before. He understood that intimacy wasn't just about words, but about presence, effort, and trust. And for the first time, he truly believed that he could meet Emily's openness with his own honesty. Their relationship, once shadowed by unspoken fears and quiet misunderstandings, had entered a new phase. It was still imperfect, still filled with moments of doubt and hesitation, but the turning point had come. Jake had faced his fears, shared his vulnerabilities, and discovered that love could be a safe space, even for someone who had spent so long hiding inside themselves. As winter approached, the ranch seemed to mirror their journey. The fields, though cold and bare, held the promise of spring. The animals continued their routines, resilient against the chill. And Jake and Emily, side by side, were learning that the strongest relationships are built not on perfection, but on courage, patience, and the willingness to grow together, one honest moment at a time. Winter had arrived fully, covering the ranch in a soft blanket of frost. The air was crisp, and the mornings were quiet except for the occasional lowing of the cattle or the distant cawing of crows. Jake and Emily had grown closer after their turning point in the barn, but life had a way of testing even the strongest bonds. Challenges that had seemed small before now appeared larger, stretching their patience, resilience, and understanding. Jake had always loved the physical work of the ranch, but winter brought added pressures. Feeding the animals required extra time and care. The machinery was prone to breaking in the cold, and the days were shorter, leaving little time for other tasks. Jake carried the bulk of these responsibilities, sometimes forgetting that Emily wanted to share in the work. He was proud and protective of the ranch, and part of him worried that including someone else would slow things down or create mistakes. Emily noticed the stress in Jake's demeanor. He moved faster than usual, his brow often furrowed, and he sometimes muttered under his breath while repairing fences or clearing snow. She tried to help, offering to feed the animals or shovel paths, but Jake often insisted she stay inside or focus on smaller tasks. It wasn't a refusal of her help. He truly valued her, but he wanted to shield her from the hardships of ranch life. Emily understood, but it stung a little that he didn't fully trust her to share in the challenges. One particularly cold afternoon, Emily suggested they take a break together. She brought 2 mugs of warm tea out to the porch, hoping the familiar comfort would lift the tension between them. "Jake," she said softly, handing him a mug, "you've been carrying so much lately. You don't have to do it all alone. Let me help, really help." Jake took the mug, warming his hands around it, but he hesitated before responding. "I know, Emily, I appreciate it. I don't want to let anything go wrong. The ranch, it's important to me. It's my responsibility." Emily placed her hand over his. "I understand that, but love isn't just about doing everything perfectly. It's about trusting each other, sharing burdens, and learning together. Let me share this responsibility with you. We're a team, remember." Jake nodded, feeling a mix of gratitude and guilt. He wanted to trust her more, but letting go of control was difficult. He had spent years handling the ranch alone, and the idea of depending on someone, even Emily, was both frightening and freeing. Over the next few weeks, small struggles began to surface in other areas as well. Jake's shyness still caused him to retreat in certain conversations, especially when Emily wanted to discuss plans for the future or make decisions about the farm. Emily, eager to involve him in her thoughts, sometimes misread his silence as disinterest. They had a few tense evenings where neither spoke much, and the quiet between them felt heavy. One evening, after a long day of clearing snow and tending to the animals, Emily gently approached Jake in the living room. "Jake, can we talk?" she asked, her voice careful. Jake looked up from the stack of papers he was reviewing, lists of tasks, supply orders, and schedules. "Of course," he replied, though he could feel a knot forming in his stomach. I want us to be honest with each other," Emily began. "Sometimes I feel like you pull back. I know you're tired and stressed, but I need to know what's on your mind. We've come so far, and I don't want small misunderstandings to grow into something bigger." Jake sighed and leaned back in his chair. "I know, Emily, and I want to be honest. It's just, I worry that if I say what I'm thinking, it might upset you. I don't want to cause problems or seem weak. I've spent so much of my life managing things alone that opening up, it still feels strange." Emily moved closer and placed a hand on his arm. "Jake, you're not weak. Being honest and sharing your feelings makes you strong. I love you for who you are, not for how perfectly you handle everything. You don't have to carry the weight of the ranch or our relationship by yourself." Jake looked into her eyes, seeing the genuine care and understanding reflected there. He realized she was right, but old habits die slowly. He wanted to trust her fully, but fear and pride often made him retreat. Winter also brought unexpected challenges that tested their patience. One morning, Jake discovered that a section of fencing had been damaged in a storm. Several of the cattle had wandered into the nearby woods. Panic surged through him as he tried to gather them, knowing the dangers of losing livestock during winter. Emily immediately offered to help, braving the cold alongside him. Together they worked tirelessly, calling out to the animals, guiding them back to safety. By the time the last cow returned, both were exhausted and shivering, but a sense of relief and accomplishment filled the air. Jake looked at Emily, gratitude shining in his eyes. "Thank you," he said simply. I couldn't have done it without you." Emily smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We did it together, that's what matters." Despite these moments of teamwork, challenges persisted. Jake's shyness sometimes made him hesitant to express love in the way Emily desired. He showed care through actions, fixing broken tools, feeding the animals, or preparing meals. But Emily also craved verbal reassurance and emotional connection. There were nights when she would try to start a meaningful conversation, only to be met with silence or short answers. Frustration bubbled quietly in both of them, though neither wanted to cause conflict. One evening, after another day of cold and hard work, Emily spoke up again. "Jake, I love how much you care for this ranch, for this life we're building, but I need you to let me in. Not just in action, but in your words. Tell me what you feel, even if it's messy or awkward. I want to hear it." Jake's heart raced. He wanted to respond, to open himself completely, but fear and self-doubt held him back. I'm trying," he whispered. "I'm not perfect at this. I want to, Emily, I really do. I just don't always know how." Emily reached for his hand, holding it gently. "That's enough. I see you trying, and I appreciate it. Love isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up even when it's hard." Over time, these struggles became a part of their shared life. They learned to navigate tension without letting it fester, to ask for help when needed, and to celebrate small victories together. Jake's efforts to communicate, even in small ways, began to bridge the gap between his natural reserve and Emily's desire for openness. Emily, in turn, learned to be patient, giving him space to express himself in his own time while encouraging moments of deeper connection. One particularly harsh winter storm forced them to rely on each other more than ever. Snow piled high across the fields, blocking paths and threatening the shelter of the livestock. Jake and Emily worked side by side for hours, clearing snow, repairing fences, and ensuring the animals were safe. Exhausted and cold, they finally retreated to the warmth of their home. As they sat by the fireplace, sipping hot tea and brushing snow from their coats, Jake realized something important. "I couldn't have done today without you," he admitted, his voice soft but steady. Not just because of the work, but because of everything. Your patience, your support, it makes me stronger than I've ever been." Emily leaned against him, smiling. "And you make me feel safe, loved, and understood. Even in the hardest moments, we can get through anything together." That evening, they understood that struggles weren't failures. They were opportunities to grow, to learn about each other, and to strengthen the bond they shared. Each challenge became a lesson in patience, trust, and communication. While the winter was harsh, it also became a season of growth, resilience, and deepening love. By the end of the season, Jake and Emily had learned that no relationship is without its difficulties. Shyness, pride, and fear of vulnerability could create distance, but effort, honesty, and empathy could bridge it. They had faced real challenges together, from harsh weather and demanding work to emotional tension and personal fears, and each time they emerged stronger. Life on the ranch remained demanding, but Jake no longer felt he had to face it alone. Emily was not just his partner, she was a teammate, a confidant, and a source of strength. And Emily, in turn, discovered that patience, understanding, and love could help someone open their heart, even after years of quiet reserve. In the quiet evenings, as snow fell gently outside and the fire crackled in the hearth, Jake and Emily sat side by side, reflecting on their journey. They knew challenges would continue, but they had learned the most important lesson. Love was not about perfection, but about showing up for each other day after day, through every struggle and triumph. Spring finally returned to the ranch, painting the fields in shades of green and gold. The air was warmer, carrying the sweet scent of blooming flowers and fresh grass. The animals were lively again, the fences repaired, and the sun rose earlier, filling the long days with light and possibility. After a challenging winter, Jake and Emily felt the change in the land echo their own growth. The difficulties they had faced together had not broken them. Instead, they had strengthened the bond between them in ways they could now fully appreciate. Jake stood on the porch one morning, watching the sunlight glint off the frost still clinging to the grass. He felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. Winter had tested him, tested his patience, his resilience, and his willingness to open up emotionally. But Emily's presence, her patience, and her constant encouragement had helped him grow. He thought of all the times he had hesitated, stayed quiet, or allowed fear to control his words, and he realized how far he had come. Emily joined him on the porch, carrying a basket of freshly picked wildflowers. She handed him a small bouquet, and Jake smiled, feeling warmth spread through him. "These are beautiful," he said softly. Emily smiled back. "I thought they'd brighten your day. And you've been so busy preparing the fields for spring. I wanted to do something to make you smile." Jake took a deep breath, feeling gratitude for her thoughtfulness. "Emily, I don't think I've ever told you how much I appreciate everything you do. Not just today, but all the little things. The way you notice what I need, the way you encourage me, it's changed my life." Emily touched his arm gently. "Jake, you've changed too. You've learned to trust, to share your thoughts, to open your heart. That's not easy, and I see the effort you've made every day. I love you for who you are and for who we are together." Jake felt a surge of emotion. He realized that the shy, reserved man who had once feared emotional intimacy had grown into someone capable of expressing his feelings, appreciating love, and accepting support. Emily's patience had not only helped him connect with her, but also helped him connect with himself. As the days grew longer, the couple began to embrace new routines together. They planted a small vegetable garden, worked on repairing fences side by side, and spent evenings on the porch sharing stories about their pasts, their dreams, and their hopes for the future. The act of working together strengthened their partnership in a way that was both practical and emotional. They had learned to communicate, to compromise, and to celebrate even the smallest victories. One afternoon, as Jake mended a broken fence post, Emily joined him with a cup of lemonade. She handed it to him and said, You know, I've been thinking. We've faced so many challenges together and we've come out stronger. I feel like we can handle anything now, as long as we're honest and patient with each other. Jake wiped his hands on a rag and nodded. I agree. Winter tested us, but I've realized that love isn't about avoiding struggles, it's about facing them together. You've taught me that, Emily. You've shown me that being vulnerable isn't weakness, it's courage. Emily smiled and they shared a quiet moment, watching the cattle graze in the sunlight. Jake felt a sense of calm he had never experienced before. He knew there would still be difficult days, moments of fear or hesitation, but he also knew that with Emily by his side, he could navigate them. Over the following weeks, the couple continued to strengthen their bond. Jake became more comfortable expressing his feelings, whether it was telling Emily he loved her, sharing worries about the ranch, or describing a memory from his childhood. Emily, in turn, continued to provide patience, encouragement, and understanding, giving Jake the space to grow while gently guiding him toward deeper connection. One evening, after a long day in the fields, they sat together on the porch swing, the sky painted with streaks of pink and orange as the sun set. Emily rested her head on Jake's shoulder and said, "Do you remember the first time we really talked in the barn? How nervous you were to share your feelings." Jake chuckled softly, remembering the moment vividly. "I do. I was terrified and I thought I might say the wrong thing or ruin everything, but you didn't push me, you just listened, and that changed everything." Emily smiled. "It did. That was the beginning of something real, something strong, and look at us now. We've grown so much together." Jake felt a deep sense of gratitude. He realized that the journey they had taken was not just about love, but about growth, patience, and mutual understanding. He had learned that relationships required effort, communication, and vulnerability, and that those challenges were worth facing when the person beside you truly cared. In the weeks that followed, Jake and Emily began planning for the future in a more intentional way. They discussed expanding the ranch, planting new crops, and exploring ways to make the land more sustainable. These conversations, which might have once caused tension or hesitation, now felt natural. Jake found himself contributing ideas, asking Emily for her opinion, and feeling proud of their shared vision. Emily appreciated his input and dedication, and together they mapped out a future full of promise and possibility. One particularly beautiful morning, Jake and Emily took a walk along the edge of the fields, hand in hand. The sunlight sparkled on the dew-covered grass, and the air was filled with birdsong. They paused by a small stream, watching the water ripple over smooth stones. "Jake," Emily said softly, "do you ever think about how far we've come, from the early days of shyness and hesitation to now?" Jake nodded, squeezing her hand. "All the time. I never imagined I could be this open, this comfortable sharing my thoughts and feelings. And I know I wouldn't be here without you. You've helped me see that love isn't just about feeling, it's about showing up every day with patience, honesty, and care." Emily smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "And you've taught me that even the quietest, shyest person can have the deepest strength. We've both grown, Jake, and I'm grateful for every step of this journey." As the season progressed, Jake and Emily continued to build their life together. They celebrated small victories, the successful planting of crops, the safe birth of a new calf, the repair of an old barn roof, and found joy in shared moments, like evenings spent by the fireplace, walks through the fields, or quiet mornings sipping tea on the porch. Their relationship, once shadowed by fear and hesitation, had matured into one of trust, understanding, and deep affection. One warm afternoon, as they sat under a large oak tree, Emily turned to Jake and said, "Do you remember how hard winter felt? How we struggled with small misunderstandings and fears?" Jake nodded, smiling softly. "I remember, and I'm glad we faced those challenges. They made us stronger. They taught me to trust, to communicate, and to open my heart fully." Emily took his hand, her eyes shining. "Exactly. Love isn't about avoiding difficulty, it's about facing it together. And we've done that. Every struggle, every challenge, every quiet moment of doubt, we faced it as a team. Jake felt a deep sense of contentment. He realized that life on the ranch was more than work or routine. It was about connection, growth, and shared experiences. Emily had become not just his partner, but his confidant, friend, and source of strength. And he, in turn, had grown into someone capable of honesty, courage, and love in ways he never thought possible. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the fields in shades of gold and orange, Jake and Emily sat together in silence, savoring the moment. They had faced fears, overcome misunderstandings, and grown stronger together. Their love had been tested, but it had endured, deepened, and flourished. In that quiet, golden evening, Jake realized something important. Life was unpredictable, full of challenges and surprises. But with patience, trust, and love, those challenges could become opportunities for growth, understanding, and connection. And with Emily by his side, he knew he could face whatever the future held, with courage, hope, and an open heart. The ranch, once a place of solitude, had become a home filled with laughter, conversation, and shared purpose. The animals, the fields, and the sunrise each morning reminded them of the beauty in life's simple moments. And most importantly, Jake and Emily had discovered that true love was not just about comfort or happiness. It was about growth, resilience, and the willingness to face life together, hand in hand, heart to heart. As they watched the last rays of sunlight disappear behind the hills, Jake and Emily smiled at each other, knowing that their journey was far from over. But they also knew that whatever came next, they would face it together, with patience, understanding, and a love that had been tested, strengthened, and proven real. And in that shared certainty, they found peace, joy, and a deep, unshakable bond that would carry them through all the seasons of life.